All right. So, welcome to the Marketing Nerdz Podcast. I have an amazing guest with me today. Lucas, thank you so much for joining us at the Marketing Nerdz Podcast. It's a privilege to have you.
Yeah, thank you, Karan. I appreciate it. It's good to be here. I'm glad I can provide some value. Want to just make sure that your listeners are taken care of and kind of get nerdy about copywriting a little bit.
Awesome. So, for our audience, let's just go back to your journey and how did you get started with your copywriting and a little bit about you.
Yeah. So I don't want to bore people with a long origin story, but my career was not supposed to be a marketing career. My family was military. My mom and my dad were both in the Air Force, and my mom retired as a lieutenant colonel. So I thought I was going to be full-time active duty military for my whole life. Like I was in all the ROTC programs. I got an officer's commission in college. But about halfway through college, I met my wife and I realized I didn't want to be deployed for half of my life. And so I had to figure out something else at that point. So the previous, 19 years of my life were kind of like, all right, what do I do? I fell into marketing. I think my dad first turned me on to the idea of having a business and working either from the internet or like on email lists and that kind of stuff. And then through a series of fortunate and unfortunate events, I basically committed to being a copywriter rather than anything else. So I dabbled in Facebook ads, I dabbled in sales funnels, I dabbled in Infusionsoft and Ontraport integrations. I dabbled in a lot of AdWords. So I went through a lot of the marketing side of things and finally decided I was going to be a copywriter. And that's all my focus was going to be. I don't know. I think that was like 2013 or 14, like committed right there. And then after I committed to that, I started working with clients. I started doing a lot more gigs. I started focusing on that entirely. And then now here we are where I've got a mentorship program with nearly 100 students that I've trained to be junior copywriters. I've worked with over 160 different clients, including Mike Dillard, Ty Lopez, Ryan Levesque, Harlan Kilstein, like a lot of the who's who of the kind of online marketing / business education space. And that's how we got here.
Wow, pretty awesome. And that's really amazing to know that you had an army background and then you transitioned into copywriting.
Yeah.
So for a lot of our listeners want to get started with copywriting and they're unsure of, where should they begin. So what was it like for you when you started copywriting and how did you begin?
Yeah. So I think with me, I found out about copywriting through the first access I had to the marketing world. I think the first email list that I was ever on was the Early to Rise newsletter, which is written by Craig Ballantyne, but it was started by Mark Ford, who also started Agora. I don't know if you're familiar with the whole hierarchy of direct response, but he was a big deal, and he talked a lot about copywriting. And then I met Yannick Silver, who is a big copywriter. I met Mike Dillard, and Mike Dillard was actually the guy who really was like, no, if you want to learn one skill, it's got to be copywriting. Okay. And so that's what started me on the path. But for anybody who's kind of starting out right now, or at least wants to become a copywriter or get better at copywriting for some reason, maybe they want to launch a product, maybe they want to run an agency. I don't know whatever you want to do, copywriting is that skill that helps you sell stuff. So my advice would be that number one, give yourself some credit because you actually know about copywriting. And in the business world, that by itself is a competitive advantage. Because when you understand that it's not just words on a website or words on paper or words on a video script, that those words have meaning and that those words can make people do things depending on what they are, you're already ahead of the game. you understand more than maybe a client would understand, or that another business owner would understand. So once you give yourself that credit, I think the next step is to, as fast as possible, get into writing copy that actually sees traffic. And however you need to do that, if you happen to have some money in the bank and you can afford to run ads, then do that. If you don't have anything at all, consider writing for clients in any capacity, working with them as a junior, coming on to help as a freelancer, but always with the focus that you want to write copy that sees traffic, that gets a result, because that cuts out all the bullshit, man. Like you got to read this book, you got to read that book, you got to read them 7 times, you got to hand copy every day. Like all of those things have purpose, but not at the expense of actually putting words on paper and then getting them out to traffic. That's my advice to anybody who's starting.
Wow, that's pretty good advice. And that's an amazing coincidence, because that's how I got introduced to the world of copywriting, was through Craig Ballantyne. He was my mentor, my first one.
Nice.
And I was in his Early to Rise coaching program. And from there, I met Matt Smith, who is Craig's partner. And he's an amazing guy. And then that got me to Dan Kennedy, and I was a part of his Titanium group.
Nice.
So, yes.
Nice. Yeah.
Pretty
So
awesome.
you skimmed the OGs pretty much. You went through that.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
That's awesome. So, what is your copywriting process like? Because I know a lot of writers, they specifically Dan, he has a huge collection of swipe files, and that's how he gets his copy done really, really fast. So, do you have a collection of swipe files, or do you work for specific industries, or?
I tend to work with similar industries, but my process is actually kind of interesting, and I don't know if anybody can emulate it. So I have the way that I teach people, because I know it consistently churns out the specific result that people need. And then I have the way that I write copy myself, which is very difficult to teach other people. So I understand myself. I don't know if you've taken a Colby test, those personality tests that tell you how your cognitive abilities are set. But I'm a 9-4-3-4, which is a pure fact finder. It's in my nature to research the crap out of stuff and to just read all day. So that means that I've got a lot of like nerd knowledge in the back of my head with all this stuff. So when I get a topic, or when a client comes to me with an offer, I'm already thinking, I've seen these 7 offers that are like that. I've seen this work in the marketplace. I know these ads are running with that angle. And so a little bit of industry knowledge and a lot of like back-end research knowledge, I'm already thinking of the thing that I want to do for that piece. And then for me, my process usually works where I will research up front just to make sure that my assumptions are valid, and then crank out a first draft as fast as possible. And I just put that thing on paper. I don't have any swipe files. I don't have anything like the competitors that they're doing on that front. I just get the first draft out as fast as possible. And then once that is out and done, I'll go back and I'll look at the parts that are good for that. I'll look at the parts that are crap. I'll edit it down, and I'll make sure that it's presentable for the client. And that's basically my whole process in a big nutshell, is the research up front, the dirty first draft, and then the editing on the back end, so that I can make sure that it looks the way that it needs to look. That's my entire process.
Wow, that's very different. And I've spoken to a lot of copywriters, and most likely everybody has a collection of swipe files. So I love the new approach. So are you somebody who writes and, like once you write your first draft, you just write without really thinking about the right and the wrong and the grammatical stuff, and then you go back and edit?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I might self-edit as I go, but just because I'm used to kind of saying, oh, this is what I meant to say, or this, this word. But I try to go as fast as possible through that process. I'm not a pure and simple, like never take your fingers off the keyboard type guy, but that's what I try to do first. And I think the reason I do that, I actually do it on purpose. I could do the process where you swipe, you write pieces as you go, you like kind of structure the copy together the way that a lot of copywriters do. But the reason I don't do that is for a couple reasons. Number one, copy inherently needs to sound different from other copy. And one of the struggles that people have when they're first starting out is peeling away from what the swipes sound like. They don't have enough of a voice of their own. And so the swipes help, and they help you structure the copy. But on top of that, they've been seen before, especially if they're in the same industry. If you have any sort of sophisticated audience at all, they're going to just blow right past it. And so it's not as effective as something brand new or different. Even if that new and different thing sounds similar and rhymes a little bit, it's still different versus a swipe. And so I do that dirty first draft of what's in my head to try to get away from that sort of swipe disease. And then on top of that, when you're writing really fast and you have the ability to just crank out a thought, you're writing in a more natural way to how people communicate. People who are very, very deliberate and calculated in what they say on paper typically don't talk the same way like they would on a podcast or, in person. And one of the biggest issues, because I've trained a lot of newbies at this point, so one of the biggest issues I see with newbies is that they can communicate just fine, like you and I are right now. They can talk, there's no problem. But as soon as they put words on paper, something shifts in their brain, and they've got all these hangups on like how to communicate with people and how to do it right. And it throws everything off. And the way that I've found to fix that is to throw the first draft out as quickly as possible with that stream of consciousness, with the back end of research and kind of like understanding what you're trying to do with the piece. So like, for example, if I'm going to look at something, if I want to sell a coffee mug, then, and I have to write copy to understand the coffee mug, or to get someone to buy the coffee mug. Well, I know intrinsically that if I am going to sell a coffee mug, what really matters is what it looks like, unless there's some unique technology. And so the words have to accentuate and help what the thing looks like and get the purchase from there, rather than me going, oh, okay, these are the top 10 coffee ads or coffee cup ads on Amazon. How can I swipe those and put that up there? And that will change my copy to be a little bit more cheeky, a little bit more fun, because I understand that I need to write in a way that gets attention back to the cup and builds desire to buy it, rather than, giving the specifications on the type of ceramic that was made and the type of print that was on there and how you wash it and the stuff that someone would normally throw up on quote unquote copy. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Cool.
And I completely agree with your take on the swipe files, because there was a point when I had a huge collection of swipe files and I would just open it up at the first thing and then start writing my copy. But I realized that the conversion was dropping with every new copy that I wrote, because it just looked a rehashed version of the earlier copies. Yep. And the moment I started writing things on my own, and then later I went back to the swipe files, my engagement and the conversion really went high. Mm-hmm. So pretty solid advice there. Yep. Awesome.
I think that swipes have a real powerful place in copy because they help anchor our thoughts. But I prefer to use them later in the process, not at the beginning, because and the last reason that I do it at the beginning is because at the beginning of a project is the closest to the prospect or the customer that you will ever be in the process, because they don't know the research, they don't know your offer, they don't know like the sales behind it, and so they're seeing it with fresh eyes. The further away you get from that, the harder it is to put yourself in their mind. And so with that first draft, I mean, that's my focus. I want to get new and different. I want to capture a natural voice, and I want to be able to communicate to the prospect in the right way for them. And that's just easier when you're newer at the project.
That's pretty awesome. So when I announced that, I was doing this podcast with you, a lot of people, they went to your Facebook page and they studied about your copywriting program. So I had a lot of them send me their questions. So nice. I told a few of them that, hey, I'll put in your question on the podcast. So this one is from Rakesh, and
Okay.
he wanted to know that if he, applied to join your program, but because he does not have a background in copywriting,
Mhm.
so does he need to be, really good with his grammar, and does he need to have a background in copywriting?
So I say no. Just so to give you an example, one of the guys that joined my program, not this time but the last time, had never even heard of copywriting, and the reason he joined was because number one, he was a friend of my wife, and so he saw my post, and number two, he saw one bullet on the sales letter that basically said one of my students made this much money for their client in this many days. He's like, oh crap, you can make 26,000 in 7 days? That's crazy. I want to do this. And that's so between him being friends with my wife and him seeing that bullet, that was the only reason he joined. He'd never written copy before. He was kind of like he's like a comic book artist in a way. That's his thing. He enjoys doing comic books and the artistry behind that and writing for them. So he did have a couple things going for him. He was a native English speaker. So anytime you're not a native English speaker, I think that you're going to have to work a little bit harder to either match or modify the copy that you're writing for a native audience if you want to write in English. But I'm going to preface that by saying there's a lot of countries in the world. You do not have to just write in English and native English. And native English means different things to different people, because in England, they speak a different form. In Australia, they speak a different form. In all over America, there's different ways to write and do that. So don't be intimidated by not being a native speaker. I just think that it is a thing to be aware of if you're not, and to have either someone to help you read it and tell you what's different about what you wrote versus what you didn't. Anybody who joins my program gets that, because I'll point out, this is how we say this. This is, this is what, this is the difference between what you said and what you probably intended to say. And a lot of people are very clearly spoken when they're saying it out loud. And I'm going to go back to the whole writing thing, because when they speak, they're fine. They're fluent. They could speak just fine. But when I get on paper, it changes for some reason. And so anybody who joins my program, it doesn't matter where you're starting with that background, we lead you through the exact same process, and it helps you understand it from a really fundamental level. And that's basically what I can tell you about it, because everybody comes from a different place and learns different things in the program. Like, to give you an example, I'm running one right now, and the 10 people who are in there, one of them has a journalistic background. She has done it for 30 years, and she's extremely factual and cold, hard facts, no persuasion, no personality, right? And she's having a hard time weaving in the persuasion. Another student right next to her is amazing at telling stories, but doesn't know how to weave in the persuasion to the story. And they're starting from different places, but they're all learning the same thing. And I feel like when you follow a specific process, it kind of just helps structure your brain in the right way to really master the skill.
That's awesome. So I hope, Rakesh, you got your answer there. And if you have any questions, you can always drop in a message to Lukas, and he'll help you out with any additional questions that you may have. Pretty awesome. The next question is from Pooja Shah, and coincidentally, it's almost on the lines of what we were talking about in the earlier question. And she asks that I'm really keen on learning the copywriting principles, but I had just one quick question. Are these principles applicable if I write copy in regional languages? Because I'm already working as a copywriter, but I really wouldn't be writing in English, but writing in Gujarati, which is one of the thousands of languages we have in India.
So yes, direct response works in any language because it's based on human behavior, but you have to adjust for cultural norms, society expectations, and so especially in India, which is so multicultural even within its own country, you have to understand what people accept, what people believe, what people most of copywriting is just understanding who you're writing to, and then using some stuff, maybe some cool tactics, but mostly just good communication skills to deliver a valuable message to that person. And so if you're writing in a different language, those principles still apply. You just have to account for any sort of cultural differences. Like, for example, if you're trying to copy a swipe that Dan Kennedy does and it's super hard hitting and like very in your face, and your culture is more subtle, or is more respectful, or is more, something like that, then you have to take that into account and understand what Dan was trying to do psychologically, but put it into the way that it works for your culture. And I think that's where people, again, it goes back to the swipe thing, because you can't just take a Dan Kennedy piece and translate it into one of the Indian dialects. It doesn't work. Like, the market's not the same. Even the income levels are not the same. The types of businesses are not the same. So you can take the principles and you can apply them. And I think that's the right angle to take. Just understand the principles, apply them in the way that your culture is.
Absolutely. And I second that, Pooja. I think you should absolutely go ahead and apply to see if you qualify for the program. I think we'll get to learn so much about the principles. And once you understand the principle, you can always, if you know your audience, you can adapt those principles for your audience and get the conversions. So I highly, highly suggest that you go ahead and apply. So I have a question for you, which is, since we were talking about the human behavior part,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm a big believer that if you understand, your customers understand how human beings operate, your copy is going to get so much better.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what drew me towards Tony Robbins. And, I enrolled for Tony's master program to
Mm-hmm.
understand his strategies and his strategic intervention principles. And then I moved on to NLP. So do you think, as a copywriter, is it important to learn all these different sciences of hypnosis, neuro-linguistic programming, strategic intervention, or could you just not do that? And can you just understand people through your instincts?
So I'm not trained in NLP, to give you context. I know about it, and I know a lot of copywriters have had massive success by being a part of it. What I typically notice is that it's actually reversed. They learn NLP first and then become copywriters. They don't become copywriters and then go learn NLP. And I think that's the case because NLP is more structured in like transformation for people, and coaching in the hypnosis space is a lot of personal development or therapy and that kind of thing. It's not it's persuasion, but it's one-to-one, person-to-person type persuasion usually. I don't think you need it personally to be a copywriter, but I think that it can absolutely help if you're struggling to bridge the gap between what your words say and what the people are actually doing. But I think that can also come from observation, can come from, making adjustments to your copy, talking to people. Some people are more instinctually better at reading people and understanding what they're doing than others. And so if you find that you're one of those people who struggles to understand why a person is doing something or why they're not doing something, usually that's more important, to understand why they're not taking action. Or why they don't care. If you're someone who struggles with that, NLP might be really helpful, because you can dig in and figure out, okay, these are what really motivates people to do stuff. This is what they're afraid of. This is why they avoid things. And I think that is incredibly valuable, but it's also, consider it a different and equally complex discipline to copywriting. So you'd have to learn both and get good at both, and that's extra time. But if you're willing to put that time and effort in, then it can only help your copy. What I would not do, and this is pretty key, is let someone sell you like a really specific, here's how to use NLP and copy type thing. Because I feel like the understanding that is necessary in both of those fields to really grasp that information, combined with the ability to teach it to an individual in a small form, is probably not going to be the case. Someone's probably not going to be able to do that in a short amount of time. So I would commit to learning both as a discipline and understand that's going to take time, and then go from there. That's kind That's what I think.
Well, that's an amazing advice. I think people should really, stick that line on the wall, because I see so many people getting carried away when they read all these awesome headlines about how to become a copywriter using NLP in just 3 weeks and 2 weeks. And like you rightly pointed out, that it takes time, it takes hard work to become a copywriter, and of course, it takes discipline. And which is why I feel your program is so authentic, because you say it like it is. You're not selling a dream that you just can be a really good, awesome copywriter in the next 7 days. Really appreciate that.
Yeah, I try, because the market is full of people who are willing to promise you something, and then they're willing to promise you something, and then they run their whole business based on the fact that 80% of people don't finish the course. Sure. So they can hide behind the fact that their material doesn't work, and because nobody's finishing their course. And I find that model to be very distasteful, personally. Which is why I keep my classes small. I keep them very high ticket, because people come in with a fire under their ass wanting to do stuff, and very intimate in terms of how they're trained. And that's why we have an 86% completion rate, and that's why we have
huge.
100% satisfaction. Like even the people who have not completed the program or have decided to leave the program because it wasn't right for them have said it's the best course they've ever taken, and that's saying something. And it's when they have no skin in the game, when there's no, they're not incentivized to say it, they're about to, they know it's not for them, and they're still saying it's the best they've ever taken. That's because of the focus we put on student success, making sure that it's, that you truly understand it, teaching it in a way that makes sense. I'm not pitching the course, actually. I'm just really proud of the fact that we've done something different than most people. And yeah, I think if you're looking for help with copywriting, find someone who believes something like that. There are other people there are other people everywhere that teach copywriting who have the same mentality of teaching rather than, selling, pitching you into their course. And so regardless of whoever you work with, if you work with no one, just understand that you should be in it for the long haul. You should attempt for mastery, and you should be taking action as deliberately in terms of getting words out to traffic, getting copy out to traffic to test. That's the key, and go from there.
Awesome. I think 80%, 86% completion rate is huge. And when I read your post, I think they were really authentic, and that's what drew me to, invite you and have you as a guest on our show, because I'm very picky about the guests that we invite, because I want to make sure that my audience is exposed to people who are legit. And I think I would urge everybody to, go join your course. It's going to be life transforming. And like you said earlier, and it's been my personal experience, that copywriting is one skill that can dramatically change your life for good. And I have this one question which I think is important, and a lot of people have this question. So I would ask you this question from Satish. So he says, I'm a business owner. I went through your Facebook profile, and he's really keen on doing the course, but he's just a little unsure that as a business owner, is it worth that he invests his time in learning copywriting, or should he just hire a copywriter?
Good question. I'll be perfectly honest with you. It's Satish, right?
Yep, Satish.
So I think that business owners have a harder time in my program because you're busy and you're running the business day to day, and my program is relatively intensive. Most students spend about 2 to 3 hours a day in the program doing the work, between watching the videos, the assignments, the daily stuff we do. That's hard for a lot of business owners, and that doesn't mean that business owners haven't completed it. They have, but others have had to back. I've noticed that the people who do back out typically tend to be very busy business owners. And But the second part of your question was interesting because you said, should I just hire a copywriter or should I learn how to do it? I think the answer is both. I think that you need to know enough about copywriting to be able to tell whether or not the person you hired is any good and be able to vet them in the first place. Because the worst thing is hiring them and giving them money and finding out they're bad on the back end. You'd rather want to find that out in the beginning when you're testing them, because there's certain things that a copywriter who's good is going to do that a copywriter who's bad will not. And that starts with the very first time that either you reach out or they reach out in terms of working together. So number one, if you're reaching out to someone, that's already a good indicator that they're probably a decent copywriter because you took the initiative to talk to them. That means they've branded themselves in the right way. That means that they've had some sort of authority and clout in the marketplace to make you reach out to them. Or they wrote a really good ad and you clicked on the ad cold, which is another good sign. If you're getting people to apply to work with you through a job board or a post, you have to vet them even better, because now you're getting anyone who can apply. Anybody can call themselves a copywriter. And if they're just sending samples and saying, hire me, that's probably not the best sign. If they're asking questions, if they want to get on the phone, if they truly care about your project, if they've already done some research, if they're putting in the work on the front end that a good copywriter should do, then that's a good sign. But you wouldn't know that unless you knew what it took to be a good copywriter. You wouldn't know that it takes market research, that it takes iteration and time, that you have to optimize in some marketplaces, especially with a new offer. You would know that a person who's good would ask about the offer and the list, because those things matter just as much as the copy. All of those things are beneficial to a business owner to know, but that doesn't mean that you have to spend the next 5 years mastering copywriting. You can probably take a crash course in what good copywriting looks like, and then use that knowledge to hire the right person, to train the right person. Perhaps you could always consider bringing on a good, hungry employee who wants to learn, and then putting them through a program instead. It's a little bit of risk on your part, but it's training for them. And if you trust that they're going to be loyal to you, or you have them sign a contract. I did this once, actually. Somebody not in this course, but in the last course, was sponsored to go through the program. And so her sponsor paid for her tuition, but they signed a 6-month contract at a specific price point per month for her to work with him. And so she was locked into working with him for at least 6 months after the program, which was good. And that relationship worked out great. She did awesome. She's still in the program. She's doing fantastic with her clients. And that might not always be the case, but in most of the time, learning copywriting to the extent that you can tell what good looks like, and then hiring after you've got that skill is going to serve you way better than just churning and burning through a bunch of writers.
Pretty awesome. So Satish, I hope you got your answer, and that was really, really helpful, specifically the part about, should you learn copywriting or should you just outsource? And I completely agree. The answer is both. And I think you covered all the points, so I shouldn't really be getting into any other details. And this is one other question that came up from a lot of people that I want to ask. And I believe I read this post as well, where you posted that you have opening for a few clients and where you would help them, get their webinar presentation done. Mm-hmm. And we have a lot of business owners who do webinars and who run webinars, evergreen webinars, mm-hmm. who ask this question that, hey, could they be, reach out to you to get the webinar script done? Because I think for a lot of them, the scripting isn't converting well. Mm-hmm. And I think they have access to Russell's, funnel script, if that's the software.
Yep.
But it hasn't been converting well for them, because I believe it needs a little bit of customization also, and which they haven't done well. So do you still have spots open for people?
Yeah, I do. So that particular offer is so I made the offer less than a year ago, but like a while ago. And then I reopened the offer for the webinars. And that's a specific service that I'm starting to do in my copywriting company, where I do it for clients. And it's systematized in a way that I can take on more than I normally would in terms of client workload. I usually only work with 1 to 2 clients per month. But in this case, I can handle, right now our capacity is at around 5 or 6, and we've sold, I think, 3 so far. So we're about halfway full for a month's worth of work. And then once that's full, we can put people onto a waiting list for the next as they go through, because these are very fast projects. They're designed they can do 2 things. They can either crank out the first webinar for someone that they haven't done yet. And that will give you, I call it the 80-20, like the Pareto principle. It'll give you good copy that hopefully, based on our research and based on the copy, will convert at a decent rate right away, but can be massaged into a really good converting piece. That's the first option. The second option is if you have one that's currently working that we would iterate on, that we would optimize, because a lot of the time, the webinars that are done through a template service, it's difficult to understand why they did what they did in the template and then modify that in order to work. And that's where the problem comes from. So you throw your copy into the template and you throw it up and it's not working. Well, you don't even know where to start to figure out if it's going to work or not. That's where I come in and my team comes in and we look at it and go, okay, this is what we identify as like the top 3 to 5 issues with the piece. Let's modify those. Let's optimize it so that, if you don't have a call to action, we'll fix the easy stuff, like making sure your lead's on point, making sure you have all the links proper, like that kind of thing. That's the second part of what that offer can do. Either a brand new webinar, number 1, or an optimized version of what you currently have, number 2. That's what we're doing. So if you're interested in that, just PM me and reach out. We'll talk about it.
Pretty cool. So I think we had about 8 or 9 people ask that question. So you can PM him, and you still have spots open. So you guys are lucky. So do that ASAP.
I probably can't do all 8 or 9. So sorry.
But please get on that waiting list.
Yeah.
Sure. So really awesome. I think I covered the majority of the questions, and if I missed your question, you can, I guess, directly send a PM to Lukas, and if you have any other questions, drop it in and I'll hopefully get the answer for you. So this is one other question that I ask all my guests. Do you have a daily ritual that you follow?
A daily ritual that I follow? I don't. And that's interesting. Well, I do and I don't. Okay, so because that's an interesting question. A lot of entrepreneurs try to do a deliberate ritual. They try to cultivate their day either at the beginning or the end. And I don't do that personally, but I also have things that I do consistently that could be considered a ritual. So I deliberately try to start my workday about 2 hours after I get up. So I give myself that morning to just kind of like do whatever I got to do. I spend time with my wife. I take the dogs out. I get coffee, like all the stuff that I want to do to make sure that I'm not feeling rushed or, slammed. And then at night I work out no matter what. And it doesn't matter how late that happens because we have a gym here where we live. So every single night I go work out. And that's my ritual. It's not super complicated. Like I've seen these awesome ones that are timed down to the minute, and it's meditation for these 7 minutes, and then a quick 16 ounces of water, and then an 8-minute power walk. And like I can understand that that's very helpful for people, but for me it's better for my mentality to give myself space to think and do stuff, and then have absolute non-negotiables in terms of fitness.
Awesome. So a follow-up question on that. Do you follow a specific writing routine? I've heard that John Carlton wears a writer's hat and he puts on the coat before he starts his writing process. So do you have a specific routine that you follow when you begin working on the copy?
Yeah, if I have to dig in, that means, if I have to sit down and do it, then I actually have a hoodie as well. It's a little zip-up Eddie Bauer hoodie. And so I put that on, and I put my big, like, my Sennheiser headphones on. They're like audio. I don't actually mix music or do any music production whatsoever, but these are the headphones that people use for that. And I do that because apparently they're really like high fidelity sound. And then I put those on, I put my hoodie on, and I open up the Word document, and then I start a really weird, like alpha brainwaves type thing on YouTube. It's a very specific track that I play because it doesn't have any music in it. It just has a weird tone that goes on, and it sends this crap through your brain and makes you focus. I use that every single time I need to buckle down, and it works like gangbusters. For some reason, it's like all of a sudden all the procrastination is gone, all the issues with creativity are gone, and you just sit down and you just crank it out. I did like a 20-page webinar in about 4 hours.
Wow,
doing that. And
amazing.
So that's what allows me to be as productive as I am, because when you can focus that much in those small pieces of time, because then you're tired afterward, then it really helps. So that's what I do. It's a little weird, but that's what I do.
That's amazing. So for people who are watching this on YouTube, I'll drop the link to all the resources and to Lucas's Facebook page in the description, so you can just click on that and get in touch with him. So one last question before I wrap up this amazing interview, and I hope you got a lot of value out of it, which is, do you or any resources that you would like to recommend, any books that people should read?
Yeah, so usually with books, on copywriting, I can never not recommend Breakthrough Advertising. It's the Bible of direct response copywriting, and it's applicable today because he teaches you how to think about markets and writing rather than how to write a good converting ad right now. It's a little heavy. It's a little textbooky. Like, every sentence has value, so it's worth it. It's also expensive. I think Brian Kurtz sells it right now for like $125, but he owns the rights to it. So if you find it somewhere else, it might cost more, it might be pirated. So that's the book that I always recommend for copywriting. But also, and this is a little bit of a shameless plug, I'm not really getting anything from it, but on my website, lucasresheske.com, under the tab vidcasts, is my entire first mentorship program for copywriters.
Wow.
It's every video that I did. It's obviously not the assignments and the critiques and the coaching and all of that, but every content video that I did from the first version of my mentorship is on my site for free, no opt-in. So check it out. That's
awesome.
I mean, it's a good resource for people, and I've had people say thank you for it. So go do that. Go check. It's probably dozens of hours worth of content. I don't know how long it is. Each video is probably more than an hour, but yeah, that's available if you want it. And other than those two things, the Breakthrough Advertising, if you have the funds to go invest in a $125 book, or my program, if you have 40 hours to go spend. Those are the things I'll recommend right now. Other than that, constantly be learning learning from smart people, but also learning from the market. Focus on what's currently happening and try to step one step back from what people are saying and try to think about why they're saying it. So don't read the headline and say Alexa voice is going to take over the world. Step back and go, who wrote it? Why'd they write it? What are they talking about? What are the trends that they're trying to catch here? And that alone is going to help you really see what's happening in the marketplace today with the changes in social media and the internet and voice and globalism and all this kind of stuff. So I think that those three things, that's what I'd recommend.
Wow, pretty awesome. I think after the interview ends, I'm heading to your site to check out the resource. And I highly suggest that you guys do the same after the interview ends. And again, if you're watching this on YouTube, I am dropping in the link in the description below. And my biggest takeaway tonight has been step back and ask why. Mm-hmm. I think that's such an amazing question, and Wow. Really, really grateful for that question.
Yeah,
I think that's completely going to
it helps,
give me a
it helps
different
me.
perspective.
Yeah, it helps me a lot.
Pretty awesome. I can't thank you enough for this amazing interview and adding so much value and answering all the questions that we had from our listeners. I urge you guys to go check out the copywriting program, and for all the people who asked me if they could apply and have you work on webinar, I think you got your answers. So please, do that right away. Please drop in your PM with the questions and everything that you have. And if you have any other questions, please feel free to drop them in the comments, or you can hit me up on Facebook or on Instagram. So I look forward to talking to you again on the Marketing Nerdz podcast. I'll talk to you soon. Have a great one. Bye bye.